Hey everyone, thank you so much for taking some time out of your Tuesday to come chat with us. As you all know, Airflow 2.4 was released yesterday, and today we're going to do a deeper dive through the Airflow UI. Um, you know, as some of you heard in the beginning, we are going to try a bit of a new format today. We just want to make it really interactive. So usually we handle all the questions at the end. We're going to try taking questions during the presentation, so please use the Q&A or the chat for questions as much as you want. We do want to make this as interactive as possible. Other than that, all the material we go through and the recording will be sent into your inbox afterwards, so be on the lookout for that. And yeah, really do want to know what your feedback is for this newer format. So feel free to shoot me an email afterwards, and yeah, happy to chat. Without further ado, Kenton, I will pass the ball to you, our lead developer advocate, to introduce yourself as well as the Airflow UI today.
Awesome. Thanks, Viraj. Yeah, thanks everybody for joining us. I'm Kenton. I'm going to be going through the presentation today. As Viraj said, we definitely want to keep this interactive. So we are talking today about the Airflow UI, which is a super fun topic. I feel like obviously the UI is really important, and I think a lot of people maybe underutilize it or don't know about all of the capabilities that the UI has. That said, we probably don't have time today or the inclination to go through every single view in the Airflow UI, and that would probably put you all to sleep. So as Viraj said, please throw in the chat or the Q&A if there's anything in particular you want to kind of dive deeper on or talk more about. I want to hear that as we go through. For today, so just to start off, in case, since this is a more introductory topic, in case anybody here is newer to Airflow, just a super brief overview. It's an open source tool for programmatically authoring, scheduling, and monitoring your data pipelines. It's super, super popular. Obviously, astronomers, the commercial developers of the Airflow project, believe heavily that it's the de facto standard. You have all of your pipelines written as Python code, which is one of the core tenets of Airflow. And as a tool overall, it's super highly extensible, scalable, and has a really great community. So those are some of the kind of high level benefits, outside of just the Airflow UI. I will also note that if anybody here is super new to Airflow, and this is kind of one of your first kind of interactions or introductions to it, we do periodically do intro to Airflow webinars where we cover more than just the Airflow UI and kind of talk about, data pipeline authoring in Airflow and things like that. So feel free to raise a hand in the chat. We can throw some links to those resources as well, or something else to kind of keep in mind and keep a lookout for in the future if you're interested in that. So with that, I will just kind of set the stage before I'm going to spend most of today's presentation actually walking through the Airflow UI. So don't worry, we won't be on slides here for too long. But I do want to just sort of take this time to urge everybody to upgrade Airflow, or if you're new to Airflow, to start with a new version. The Airflow UI has been getting a lot of great updates in recent Airflow versions, especially going back to Airflow 2.0. So that somebody in the chat asked about updates to Airflow since 2020, which I think Airflow 2.0 was released at the end of 2020. It's hard to keep track of now. It feels like quite a long time ago. And the UI is super different. So if you're still working on Airflow 1.10 or even Airflow 2.0 or 2.1, a lot of the features that we're going to talk about today have been released in new Airflow versions. These are, everything from like big new views that we're going to talk about that just simply didn't exist before, to kind of smaller things that are big, like quality of life improvements for those who are working with the UI all the time. So these things are super, super useful. And again, this is just my long-winded spiel to try and get everybody to upgrade to new versions of Airflow. We will also be talking in depth today about sort of a sneak peek into some of the new UI updates in Airflow 2.4, which was released yesterday. So super hot off the press. But again, all of that to say that the UI is definitely something that is in active development and is improving all the time. So great reason to keep your Airflow usage in up-to-date versions. I'm not going to go through a whole lot about actually running Airflow today. I'm just going to jump right into the UI, but I did want to throw this slide in here, especially for the materials that you receive afterwards, to say that the easiest way to get started with Airflow, if you're not already using it, is by using the Astro CLI. That's what I'm running locally to show you Airflow, the Airflow UI today. It's fully open source. You can go download it today and play around with it. And you can do that with 2.4 version is already supported. So again, this will all be sent to you afterwards. So if you're looking for a quick and easy way to start playing around with it yourself, this is definitely the way to go. So with that, I will hop right over into the UI itself and go ahead and get started. And again, I'm going to highlight that I am running Airflow 2.4 here. So some of the features that I'm going to talk about are super new, so released yesterday. I'm also going to kind of start with kind of the basic views and then kind of move on to maybe more complicated ones, or I should say not more complicated, but maybe lesser known ones that people might have questions on. But I'll reiterate again, definitely throw anything in the chat because we can dig in wherever you want to, really, for those of you who are here with us today. So with that, here we are in the Airflow UI. Again, I'm just running Airflow locally. If you are working with open source Airflow, not using Astronomer's CLI, which is also open source, but you might see, kind of different colors here. Astronomers, if you're using the Astronomer's CLI, you're using one of our runtime versions. That's what it says down here. So runtime 6.0 is based on Airflow 2.4. The UI itself is going to be totally the same. So if you're working with open source Airflow, not through the Astro CLI, your colors will be a little bit different. You won't have this astronomer tab. So that's going to link you to some astronomer resources, but otherwise functionally it's going to be the same. So this is still applicable to you. Cool. Once you get to the Airflow UI, most folks who have used Airflow are probably familiar with this. Obviously, DAGs view is my homepage here. It's going to show me all of the DAGs in my Airflow environment. This is a view that has gotten huge updates, particularly since Airflow 2.0, but even in subsequent releases of Airflow. So there's just a lot more you can do here than you used to be able to, including obviously pretty simple things like filtering your DAGs to active or paused, filtering by tags. So I've got some tags here, but I can filter to downstream or something like that. And search, this is obviously more useful in a case where you have a lot of DAGs, might be more than the 6 or so that I have here. I have all of the information about my recent DAG runs and their schedule, the last run. This next run is new, so this is particularly useful for trying to figure out when a DAG run is going to happen, so you can see easily when that DAG is next slated. Recent tasks is going to show you the statuses of just the most recent DAG run. So compared to the runs, which will show you all of the DAG runs, this is going to show you just a breakdown of tasks within that run. And then you have a whole bunch of actions directly from this page. So I can hop to another view for a particular DAG. I can trigger the DAG. I can delete it, which is not going to actually delete your DAG file. So one important piece, especially for those who are newer to Airflow, to note about the UI is that you can't make any changes to your DAG code from the UI. So deleting a DAG file is going to delete it from your metadata database. It's not going to delete your Python file that defines that DAG. That will get picked up again if you leave it in your DAGs folder next time that the processor runs through. You also can't make any changes to, say, the schedule or any other piece of your DAG code. So again, Python-based pipelines are a core tenet of Airflow, so any changes you have to make directly in the DAGs there. Cool. So that's about all I wanted to show on this page. So with that, let's go ahead and drill into one of these DAGs in particular and kind of go through some of the newer views that are DAG specific. I'm going to take a look at this example DAG basic. Just for an example here, and you'll notice that the first view that I defaulted into here is the grid view, and grid view is new as of Airflow 2.3. So particularly if you're on an older Airflow version, you might be used to seeing the tree view here, which looked similar, though a little different. This was a huge update that came in the last Airflow release. The historical tree view was useful, but kind of tried to do a lot of different things at the same time. It was trying to sort of show the structure of your DAG and the dependencies while also showing a history, and you kind of got the worst of both worlds. So the update to the grid view was an attempt to remedy that. So notice you no longer see the dependencies between your tasks here. This view is now focusing solely on the history of your DAG runs. So you can see your task instances and the status. Everything's going super well in this DAG. So it's all green. Obviously, you would see any failures here. You also have this nice duration graph as well. So this is super helpful for identifying if something is running a lot longer than you think it should, or maybe it was shorter than you think it should be. So you have a quick insight there. You also have this panel off to the right that is going to show by default information about the DAG. So just kind of general information about the DAG as a whole, including the summary on tasks that are in the DAG and when it first ran and then when it has last run. If I click into one of these tasks in particular, I still have all of my task instance information, although it's in this nice view kind of side by side now instead of just a different window. One huge change in Airflow 2.4 is that you now have a logs view embedded into this grid view, which is super nice. So you can still click to go into the log separately. So that button is here, but you don't have to do that anymore as of 2.4. These will show up here. This will also auto update as the task is running. So you will see logs in real time as your task is going. Sounds like we have a question here, Raj.
Yeah, first question. You actually just answered it, right? Do the logs auto update, or do you have to refresh the page each time?
Yeah. So they will auto update. I will go ahead and trigger this. The stag might not actually run long enough for me to show anything. We'll try it with a different one in a minute, but yeah, great question. So you will see kind of the current status of your logs here if your task is ongoing, presuming it takes more than half a second to run. Yeah.
And I think one more follow-on question on that from Ethan is, sounds like the order of the tasks sometimes shuffle in the graph view before 2.4 and before 2.3. When you have the auto refresh on, does that still happen, or is the order going to be consistent after, especially in the grid view?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the order of the tasks here, because there are no dependencies shown, is generally what runs first. So if you have tasks running in parallel in your DAG, you can get kind of inconsistencies in terms of what shows here. That has been updated in 2.4. So yeah, I'm drawing a blank on that update and what that order is going to be. But there was a change to that in the 2.4 update.
Gotcha. Etan, we'll make sure to go over that during our 2.4 webinar next time.
Yeah. This is really just my attempt to get people to also join the next webinar where we talk about all of this in depth. But
yeah.
Yeah, that's a great question.
Awesome. Thanks for the question.
Yeah, cool. So yeah, grid view, again, super useful here. You still have again, all of the options for task actions. So these are something that particularly for newer Airflow users, not always super intuitive, but if you need to rerun a particular task in your DAG or change a task status, you can do that directly from the Airflow UI. So one way to do that, say if you wanted to rerun a DAG from a particular task, so maybe I don't want to rerun the entire DAG, I just want to run part of it. I can come in here and clear the task status. So this is one way of doing this. You have a whole bunch of options you can see here when doing this, which will determine what is cleared. So whether or not I clear everything upstream or downstream, only failed instances, things like that. So when you're doing this, always make sure to actually check, do what it says in the UI and wait a minute, check which task instances are going to be cleared and make sure that it's what you want. So in this particular case, I've chosen this one that has one downstream task. So I'm clearing two. If I go ahead and confirm that, you'll see these statuses are now blank. And because that was a scheduled DAG run, Airflow went ahead and reran them. So if you need to clear a task, that's a super easy way of doing so. Question I get pretty often from new Airflow users is, can you also do that programmatically? The answer is yes, absolutely. You can also take these actions through the Airflow API or the Airflow CLI, but you have the option in the UI too. So if you're more comfortable kind of working in the GUI here, that's a great option. These other ones are also super useful, marking failed, marking success. If you need to change the status of a task for any reason, you can come in here and easily do that. So you can do this from a lot of different views on the DAG in the UI, but I would say, in my personal opinion, the grid view is probably the easiest way of doing that because you have this task instance view where you see everything super clearly. Cool. So from there, I'm not going to spend too much time on the graph view because, again, it's pretty straightforward. But because the grid view is not going to show you the structure of the dependencies in your DAG anymore, since it's focused on task instance history, the graph view is the easiest way to see the graphical view of what's going on in your DAG. This is probably the view I look at most frequently when developing new DAGs, just to make sure that all of my dependencies are set correctly. If you have something like this, it's pretty straightforward. Obviously, if your DAG gets a lot more complicated, this is a good way to come and double check on this. Again, you have options for all of those task actions from here as well. So I can come here, clear statuses, mark failed, mark success, as well as hop into any of these other views. So the logs, instance details, render template, all of that stuff. One thing I will bring up with modifying task instances, rerunning things, if you have to do this for a lot of different DAGs or are looking at things on more than just a single DAG basis, you can obviously go through each individual DAG and make changes as needed, but it's probably easiest to do that in bulk. So there is a view in which you can do that. It's called the task instances view. So you can get to that from the browse menu. There are also other links to this kind of throughout the Airflow UI. But this is going to show you all of your task instances for every DAG that has run in your environment. It's not super useful for viewing just what's going on in general because it's just this massive list. However, it does give you the opportunity to search and filter and bulk make changes to these task instances. So if I needed to set states to failed success, anything else, or clear the status, which again is going to trigger them to be rerun if they were scheduled, this is the best view to do so in bulk. Makes sense. Cool. Well, let's go back to one of our DAGs here. And I'm going to point out again, kind of a few of the lesser known views. So if anybody wants to go through anything in particular, speak up in the chat. Another one that's new as of, I'm losing track of these now. Airflow 2.1, I think. Maybe 2.2, 2.1, 2.1.
I think it was 2.1. Yeah.
2.1 is the calendar view, which is really useful for seeing kind of overall, like on a calendar, what the status of your DAG runs is. One useful thing that has been added, so this was not part of the 2.1 release, I think it was actually part of the 2.4 release, is these planned runs, so you can see when your DAG is going to run. So this particular one I think is scheduled daily, so you see dots on every day. But particularly if you have DAGs with more complex schedules like timetables, so maybe they're running only on skipping holidays or only on trading days or things like that. This is super useful for viewing both kind of historical status and also for what's planned.
Question here, Kenton, is so first off, I think what you said was nail on the head for financial services. I feel like I see this view used all the time, but can I jump into the task logs or something else from here? Or do I have to navigate to that back in my graph view? Okay.
You can, yes. Yeah, so clicking into one of those days will take you to obviously the grid view, as just happened, for that particular DAG. So the calendar view node is not going to show you anything for specific tasks. So it's going to show you the DAG run as a whole. So that's what the color coding here is for. But so you'll be taken to that particular DAG run in the grid view, and from there you could further drill down into particular task instances. Yeah, great question. Cool. So next thing I want to cover a little bit are, again, some of the other views that relate to more Airflow admin kind of stuff. So beyond just your individual DAGs, if you're a DAG author, obviously you might spend a lot of time here. If you're managing an Airflow instance, particularly if you're responsible for scaling it, or maybe if you're running on Astronomer and it's going to scale for you, but you just want to know what's going on, you want to kind of manage how things are running within your Airflow instance. There are views in the UI that are set up to help you with that. So those in general are going to be both in this admin tab and in this browse tab. One of them, for example, is pools. So pools are something that you can use when you're scaling Airflow to kind of control how many tasks can run at any given time. So you can create kind of arbitrary buckets with which to put those tasks in, and then kind of put in finer grain controls from there. Pools, again, are something that you can add in other ways, but one basic way is to add them in the UI here. So if you need to add a new pool, you can just come here in the UI and do this. A common theme you'll hear me discuss today is that most of the things that you can do in the UI, you can also do in the API, and some of them you can also do in the CLI. That's particularly true. Again, everything I'm talking about today is post Airflow 2.0. So stable REST API was a great feature that was released and has also expanded a lot in recent Airflow versions. So you're not necessarily limited to the UI for any of these things. It's mostly just maybe the simplest way to do that. But pools are something we see used pretty frequently. In this particular case, I don't have anything running right now, so there's nothing showing up in running slots are queued. But if you do have a larger Airflow instance and a lot of DAGs and you're using pools, this is a great view to kind of, again, manage how things are going so that you are working within the confines of, the scale of your Airflow instance and your Airflow infrastructure. Another view that's, again, really interesting and maybe not used quite so much is the Airflow SLAs. So these are kind of funky in how they work, but you do have a view here for showing any missed SLAs. So this is something that we see used also pretty frequently for an alerting system if your tasks are taking longer than expected. Again, it's kind of funky. So if you're interested in this, we have some resources we can point you to that kind of explain how they work. They're not the most intuitive feature, but it is here in the UI. So this is something that you can come view. Obviously, I have a DAG that's set up to run pretty frequently that misses its SLA. So I've got a whole bunch in here. But this is something that, yeah, you can easily see in the UI. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I think there's a few questions around folks who've never used this view before because they don't know what an Airflow SLA is. So could you just talk about that?
Yeah, for sure. Again, not a super intuitive feature. And Viraj, if you want to throw a link in the chat to our, it's in our error notifications guide. We have a section on SLAs for sort of follow-up reading if anybody's interested. But basically an SLA is something that you can set in your DAG as a time, and I'll go to the DAG where I have this set and show you what it looks like in the code. Good highlight of the code view if you're not familiar. But what you can do is say, you can do this on the task level or you can set it for the whole DAG, is you say what the SLA is for this task. And the idea is that if the difference between the execution date of the DAG and when that task finishes is longer than what you have set for the SLA, then you will miss that SLA and you'll get an error notification. So you might get an email if you have that set up and it will show up in the UI. Probably the most frequent point of confusion for SLAs in particular, how they work right now, is they're based on the DAG execution date and time, not the actual time that the task takes to run. So if you're setting them up, you have to kind of think through what you want that SLA number to be based on sort of how the task runs. In this particular case, I have this SLA task, this Python operator where I've set the SLA to 5 seconds. But we look at my Python function, this function sleeps for 40 seconds, so it's going to miss it every time. But again, keeping in mind that that SLA is evaluated from the execution start date, the execution date of the DAG, not did this task actually take so long to run. So you might have a case where an upstream task took a long time, but like your downstream task that has an SLA might have taken less time to run than that SLA. So maybe in this case, it took, say, 2 seconds, but it took more than 5 seconds for me to get to this task. It would still miss it. Just kind of a roundabout way of explaining that. Again, we see a lot of confusion around SLAs. There's certainly an Airflow feature that I think there will be more development on in the future to make them more intuitive. But feel free to reach out to us if you have questions about them or need help. Cool. So that was let's see, we talked about SLA misses. Okay, the next I want to talk about is some of the new kind of 2.4 stuff. So we've touched a little bit on things that have been added in recent Airflow versions. So a lot of these really useful views. The other thing I want to talk about is kind of a sneak peek into super new. So again, this is as of yesterday, use into 2.4. I'm not going to talk a lot about the 2.4 features because we do have a webinar coming up in 2 weeks where we'll do a deeper dive into that. But there were some improvements that are outside of just 2.4 features specifically, and are super useful, I think, for the UI. Actually, before I do that, I want to go back here. And so one thing that is really great that was released kind of first in 2.0 and then for subsequent views kind of in later versions is this auto refresh, which means if I trigger this DAG, I will automatically see as this DAG goes through the status of my task. So I don't have to keep refreshing the page. If any of you are like me and have been using Airflow for years, you might remember just refreshing your browser like a whole bunch to try and see the status. It was super annoying. You don't have to do that anymore. So this auto refresh is present here in the graph view. It's also here in the grid view. It's here. And again, it'll turn, if you trigger something automatically, it will turn on. As of Airflow 2.4, so yesterday, the DAGs view on the homepage here also has an auto refresh. So you will see any statuses here. If I trigger this DAG, we'll trigger this DAG, we can see some statuses already showing up, which is super nice. So again, just kind of a quality of life improvement there. That also brings me to, for any of those of you who are looking really closely at this, this DAG, this data set downstream, you might have noticed just ran. So it was green here a second ago, and now it's completed. I didn't actually trigger that one, and it's because it's scheduled on the completion of other tasks. So you can see the next one here says 0 of 2 data sets updated. One of the major new features in Airflow 2.4 was data sets and data aware scheduling. So there's lots of new views within the Airflow UI to support that feature. Again, I won't go into it too much in depth here. We'll save that for next week, but you can see that the schedule, this particular DAG is scheduled on a data set. You'll also notice there's a new data sets tab here. So this is going to be a brand new view in 2.4 to support that feature. This is going to show me all of the data sets that I have defined in this Airflow environment, as well as kind of a graph view of how they all interact between the data sets and the DAGs. You can also do some filtering here, see the task instances. If I click on one of these, it'll take me back to the grid view. So again, theme here in newer Airflow versions, the Airflow views are much more tied together than they used to be. So there's a lot more intuitive. If I click on this, it will take me somewhere else that gives me more information on it, which is super nice. So data sets view, the other view that is not limited just to data sets, but again, is super useful and was released in 2.1. I keep saying these things and I'm not sure if it was 2.1 or 2.2. Is the DAG dependencies view. So this is under the browse tab. DAG dependencies is going to show me exactly what it sounds like, any dependencies that I have between DAGs in my environment. If you're in 2.4, you will also see data sets here in the connection. So the green boxes are my DAGs, the orange ones are data sets. This view is also present again prior to 2.4 and will show you anytime that you have DAG dependencies defined through either a data set, an external task sensor, or a trigger DAG run operator. So if you're using any of those methods to implement cross DAG dependencies, this view will show them to you here, which is, again, super useful for figuring out kind of what's going on in your broader Airflow environment. Cool. Pause there. Any questions on any of those views?
So if I'm not on 2.4, Kenton, is the DAG dependencies view going to be there? Is it going to be, is it new to 2.4 or is it only, like, what's the difference in 2.4 versus 2.3 for DAG dependencies? Yeah,
great question. So DAG dependencies view will still be here as long as you're on, I'm pretty sure DAG dependencies was 2.1. So certainly if you're on 2.3 or 2.2, you will still have this view. Prior to 2.4, you won't see this data set category that I have here, and you wouldn't be able to use that feature. But you would still see any dependencies set up through external task sensor or trigger DAG run operator in this view.
Perfect.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think this view alone is so exciting in terms of where Airflow is headed. There was another question about one of the previous views that you showed on the calendar view. Mm-hmm. Is the calendar view going to be per DAG or is it for all of your DAGs?
This is per DAG.
Gotcha.
So for this particular one, I'm just looking at this data set downstream. You will see the difference in this one. Actually, a couple differences here compared to the last one we looked at. One, I see a 2021 calendar, which has to do with the start date that's defined on this DAG. So this one, has a 2021 start date instead of a 2022. So I see multiple years there. The other thing you'll notice is that this planned run, so the run with the little dot in it, we don't see any of those here. That's because this DAG is scheduled on a data set. So it's not running on a time-based schedule. So Airflow doesn't know when it's planned. You might not know when it's planned, which is, I guess, the whole point of that feature. But yeah, so you do see this for each individual DAG. Yeah.
Awesome. Any questions from anybody else? I think we got through most of them, but if there's other UI questions folks have, please feel free to drop them in the chat right now.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think there's so again, we've covered maybe the more frequently used features and views in the Airflow UI today. There are definitely lots of others. Obviously, you can see in this browse tab there are a whole bunch of other views in here that may or may not be useful for you, kind of depending on whether you're more on the DAG authoring side. Again, those folks tend to be looking at like task instances. DAG runs is another view. This will show you, again, so very similar to task instances, but at the whole DAG level. Also give you some opportunities for action. So if you wanted to bulk rerun a whole bunch of DAGs, we've seen people do that a lot, especially like migrating to new Airflow environments, or if you have a new data source that you need to rerun a DAG for like a whole bunch of times, this can be a great way of doing that. If you're, again, more on the Airflow admin side, or you're responsible for your Airflow environment, you might be more interested in things like the audit logs, which, again, this is filterable, so you don't have to look at this massive list, but this is going to show you an audit of everything that's happened in your Airflow environment. Particularly interesting, in my opinion, to see when DAGs have been triggered manually versus scheduled. But it will also show you just everything that has happened in the UI. So you can see all these events of me clicking on different things in the past 30 minutes or so. So yeah, overall, I would say the UI is super comprehensive. You just have tons of opportunity here for monitoring what's going on in your DAGs, as well as kind of controlling task instances in particular. Yeah, that was most of what I wanted to show in depth. So I know we just have a few minutes left. I'll leave it open if there are any additional questions.
Yeah. A question coming in is, for some of these kind of bulk statistics around DAGs, right? Like failures, successes, etc. Can you get those via API as well?
Yes. So yeah, I'm hesitating because I don't remember the name of the endpoint, but yes, you can definitely get this information. So this is probably all part of the DAG run endpoint. And typically with the API for those endpoints, you can set like a date range for which ones you want to pull. And they do have, there is like a clear endpoint, or, for modifying the task statuses. So yeah, some folks will prefer to do stuff like that programmatically in general. And that's totally doable.
Awesome. Well, someone just linked to our getting started with Airflow guide, which is awesome. Let me see if there's questions here.
That's a great tutorial. Also, if you want to get started, it does walk through a little bit of the UI for playing around with it. But yeah, that's a great option if you're looking for somewhere to start.
All righty. Awesome. Well, it doesn't seem like there are any other questions around the UI that we haven't answered. Like we said, this video along with the slides will make it over to you in your inbox. So be on the lookout for that. And of course, if you have any questions or anything along those lines, please feel free to reach out to us and we will more than happily find time to chat. And we'd just love to know a little bit more about what you're doing in Airflow and any ideas you have that would make it, especially around the UI. I can't talk today, especially around the UI that would make it better for you. But until then, thank you all so much for joining, and we look forward to seeing you on our 2.4 webinar.
Yeah, that's coming up in 2 weeks, so definitely don't want to miss that one. And yeah, thanks, Viraj. I'll also throw out there that, as Viraj said, the Airflow UI is obviously continually being updated, and features are being added all the time. So great reason to upgrade, but also Viraj said, if there are things that you particularly want to see, or capabilities that you think it doesn't have that you want it to have, I know that the folks that are working on the Airflow UI are super open to hearing that feedback. So definitely reach out to us.
Perfect.
Awesome.
All righty, everyone. Thank you so much for your time. We'll see you soon.
Have a great rest of your day, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.